Hey everybody, welcome to Love and Relo, the voice of the relocation industry. I am your host, Ben Cross. I am so blessed and honored to be back from an 11-day hiatus. I'm very well rested, recharged, and a little bit rusty right now for being off for so long. So I've got some wonderful guests here. I've missed y'all terribly. It's good to be back in the saddle here. Got some great guests today. We've got Yvonne Kwa from the World Bank Family Networks, and we've got Lauren Herring, CEO of Impact Group and author of the book Take Control of Your Job Search, which we will be discussing the book. We will be discussing job searches. We will be discussing helping spouses and partners who are relocating as well, or accompanying talent, as Lauren has educated me on the new term. It's not trailing spouse anymore, it's accompanying talent. So we're really excited about that. So I'm going to bring out those folks now. So let's go ahead and bring out Lauren. Lauren, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Glad to be here, Ben.
It's so good to have you back. I'm so happy to have you. And thanks for coming on such short notice here to talk about your book. This is fantastic.
Absolutely. Yep.
Let's hear you. And let's bring Yvonne out. Yvonne Kwa, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. And looking forward to having an engaging conversation.
Yvonne, it was so nice of you to volunteer and to reach out to be on with us today to discuss job search and everything. Can you quickly here before we hop in everything, tell us a little bit about what you do at the World Bank Family Network?
Well, the World Bank Family Network is essentially a volunteer-run organization with a core staff who are the subject matter expertise, and I do the career lab. So I run that as, we attract very highly talented staff, and they are usually married or partnered to accompanying talent. I really like that phrase, Lauren, because it's I crusading against a trailing spouse. I think that's rather rude, actually.
Yes.
As I always tell people, nobody follows anybody, whether they're male or female. And so what do? We support the accompanying talent. So we have three aspects to our work. We welcome people, we prepare them for career development, professional development, and then we help them move out to our 140 offices. Because we have 140 offices across the globe, and in countries that are rather challenging, where generally it's usually us and the UN and the NGOs, the corporates are not really there. So that's what I do. I support accompanying talent. I really love that, and I think they'll love it better.
So do you sit within the Global Mobility Organization, or how does that partner with the Global Mobility function?
We are not part of Global Mobility. We are a very unique creation, I would say, in that we are partners. We're not part of HR. We are partners with HR, and we advocate and support accompanying partners and families. So
Yvonne, how often does the World Bank actually hire spouses or partners?
That we don't have statistics on. Okay. We don't keep that. We basically have what we call bank couples. If they, and a lot of them are bank romances. They come in as professionals and they meet. There is no nepotism rule. So in that sense, we are quite forward thinking in that both partners can work for us, provided they don't report to the same vice president. So as long as you don't do that, and you don't have the same reporting line, you can work, and we're large enough to contain two people, and you don't really have to meet each other. You don't have to unless you want to, so to speak.
Right.
And we also have consultant opportunities as well, and spouses are not precluded from that. But you're not hired because you're a spouse. It's not affirmative action. You are hired because you have talent and you just happen to be a spouse. That's the way it is. And that's the way the bank approaches it. There's no special track.
So So this is really interesting, and we've got a few people checking in here, so I'm going to go ahead and honor some of those folks. And if you're watching right now, please go ahead, hit the like, hit the heart for Yvonne and Lauren. Okay, drop a comment, give yourself a shout out. Let's hear it for our guests today. I'd love to also hear what questions you have about your job search, or maybe you are accompanying talent or have been yourself, or maybe you are between opportunities right now or searching for that next opportunity. I'd love it if you just throw something in the comments there, and we'll go ahead and give you a shout out. This is as much a dialogue between you, the viewer, as it is between us and the guests here. So let's go ahead and talk to a couple people here. Sandra Clary, welcome back. Thank you, Sandra. I've missed you. It's good to be back. Sandra's so nice. Francine Drusty, hi Ben, excited to see you again. Hi Janet and everyone else too. So kind of you, Francine. I think Francine's in St. Louis also. So we have a St. Louis contingent checking in here. Sandra Clary loves accompanying talent so much better than trailing spouse.
We're on a march to change the industry with this term.
Yes.
I think so. Lauren, you got to print up some accompanying talent T-shirts or something, because I think this could really have legs, you know?
I love that. Next time we have an in-person ERC, we're all going to be walking around with accompanying
Yeah,
talent.
go check out
Great
the
idea.
Impact Group booth over there. They got the accompanying talent, you know?
Awesome.
Brian Rivers, First Tech, checking in. What's up, Brian? Good to see you. Gino, Michelle Rivera Mercado. I love the names. Good afternoon from NYC. Is that a Statue of Liberty icon? Oh,
Very cool.
Very nice. Casey Gale, hi all. PC Housing checking in. Jorge Rodriguez, thank you all for the excellent talk today. Vendium checking in. Good to see you, Jorge. Victoria McCullough, welcome back. Hey, Victoria, it's good to see you here. Amanda Underwood Rakowski, hi from Phoenix and NEI. I'm sure it's hot in Phoenix. An update there. So Yvonne, that's fascinating. It's great that the World Bank has its own, the family network. I think that's fantastic. I've not heard of anything like that with an in-house corporate function. And Lauren, I mean, maybe you're in this space more than I am. Yvonne, Lauren, do you know of a lot of companies that do something like this with an in-house resource? I don't know of many.
I'm familiar with a couple companies that have created various types of networks. Nestle has done something over the years with a network where they've actually worked to engage some other companies as part of that. And then over the years, Shell, I believe, has done a partner network as well. It's very rare, but it's wonderful when they can be, when the population supports it and there's involvement. So I think the fact that, like Yvonne said, it's volunteer run, that has its a blessing and a challenge, but it also seems like Yvonne is there to be the glue between all the volunteers.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
There is a coordinator actually who's the glue. I advise on program development, and my own background is global mobility and human resources, and I'm also a coach. And my focus is professional development, both in Washington, D.C. and across 140 countries, which is challenging. I mean, we don't find jobs for people. We're very clear on that because it's not possible. But, a bit like the Impact Group, we support the spouses, we enable the talent to basically find their feet and find their legs and continue well on the journey. That's how we see our role.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I'm also really interested in, maybe you can share about your approach to this, because at Impact Group, since our inception in 1988, we've been delivering virtual career coaching. And I know that's what you guys do as well. And so I think pre-COVID, maybe there was a little bit still of a bias that you have to be in person to be able to provide that coaching, or you need to know that exact market, everything that's going on in order to provide career coaching. So I'd be interested in your perspective, Yvonne, of how you've been able to support people in 140 countries.
Well, it's very interesting. You described us in a way to the T. And I mean, part of that was probably me as well. Being a faithful, hardcore believer in face to face. And we sort of thought, well, it is very difficult. How can we touch 154 countries, the spread, the time zones? And, COVID has been this wonderful opportunity because we couldn't even have the in-person ones in DC. So what do you do? So I basically rewrote the whole Career Lab for a worldwide audience. And we turned it around in a month. And by May, we had a worldwide program that was done on Zoom. So there's nothing like necessity is the mother of invention. We had to do it. So it was like, okay, let's go and let's do it. And now I think, I'm quite used to it. I mean, of course, I have a co-producer so that we can do all the more interesting things like breakout rooms and polling and whiteboards and Jamboards and, those sorts of things to make it. So we have done it now, but I had to rethink the content as well, because initially the Career Lab was really to prepare people for the US market. I mean, actually, to be specific, for the Metro DC market, not the whole of the US, because they live and work in this area. So anyway.
I love what you said, Yvonne, about how, necessity is the mother of invention, and how the pandemic definitely created all this urgency and necessity around new ways and processes to do things. I was just having this conversation with the Worldwide ERC Foundation, about how do you pivot, right? And a lot of times we show up and we say, okay, let's do what we did last year with a little different twist. Let's do what we did last year with a little different twist. And this year it's like, okay, let's do what we did last year, except we can't talk to each other in person. And like, that's like not a little twist. That's a major fundamental change, right? And so it changes everything we do. And then Lauren, you wrote this book right here, which I want to get to and I want to talk about, and you were going to release it, and then COVID hits, right? And so, but before that, I want to go back to what made you write this book, right? Because I think the timing turned out to just be, destiny almost, right? I mean, what made you write this book, Take Control of Your Job Search? I'd like to understand your journey and how you got here.
Yeah, so despite the timing being incredibly uncanny with being able to publish this during COVID, I'd actually been writing it prior to that for over a year and a half. And so what actually started this was a conversation with an individual, very high level, high functioning executive, who, when we were having a networking conversation, he was just literally throwing the kitchen sink at me. Here's what I'm doing, and here's what I'm doing, and here's this PowerPoint, and here's this specifically customized resume that I did, and here's everything that I'm doing. And yet, what was coming across to me in this networking meeting was just that fear was in control of his job search, and that what's one of the things that I talk about in the book, hypomania, just doing was his answer for moving forward, rather than necessarily taking the time to feel what was going on and be planful about his search, be more strategic about the search. And so between that and a few other kind of situations where I think when I was on last, I explained how we were looking at Impact Group of how do we consolidate the program to do more with less, to help a lot of our partners who are clients who are asking for less expensive programs, but recognizing that emotional support is so core to everything that we do, and that that emotional support is one of the most valuable parts of our coaching program. So between having this personal aha, as well as recognizing where some of the key value comes from in our services, I realized that there's hundreds of books out there on the market supporting people through job search in terms of what to do, but not necessarily how to deal with the unexpected emotions that people a lot of times just aren't even prepared for during the search.
Yeah, and I love that you talk about hypomania, because that's one of the things that stuck out to me as well, because I think that would probably be the mode that I tend to go to when I'm afraid of things.
Shocking, Ben.
I'm dialing it back right now as we speak, actually. But Yvonne, I wanted to ask you, what jumped out to you about this book, and what made you want to read this book? What drew you to this?
Well, it's very much the same along the lines of what Lauren said, because in the end, it is our emotion that drives us. The emotion can make or break the situation. And like she said, like this guy who seems so hyper, I've done everything and I still don't have a job. So, and I think so often, I think we are afraid of our emotions because I think sometimes they're either too difficult to look at and I don't have the capacity. So therefore it's easier for me to deny. And then the next question is, if I look at it face to face, then what do I do with it? And so I'm glad, to me, this book represented dealing with the elephant in the room in so many aspects. I mean, I don't necessarily think that everybody goes through all those emotions. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But for instance, I would take anger, because anger and the accompanying talent, Lauren knows, goes hand in hand. And sometimes I walk into my workshop and I can feel the anger for some people. I mean, they're just mad. And I know they're not mad with me. They're just mad with life. And you can feel it. And I can feel our workshops, we do a series of workshops because one workshop in and of itself doesn't fix anything. You can feel you can literally feel the anger being dialed down.
Yeah.
I mean, you can feel it being sapped out of them as they have the capacity to look again, to find some confidence, and all those sorts of things. So that's why I was very interested to see that somebody had put it down in a systematic way.
Yeah.
And the thing that I like actually very, very much about this book is I like the assess and the checkpoint, because I think then it establishes the dialogue with the reader, and I can read it and I can say to myself, gosh, is that me? And I like to take control of the checkpoints because they're in bite sizes. I mean, I can decide what I have the capacity to do with or without a coach. Obviously, with a coach, I would have greater capacity, but without, at least I can help myself a little, I think.
I want to go ahead and check out some comments here, because there's a couple that I think are very timely here. Some shout outs here. Gino shouting out some folks. Andrew Bruzy, a winning team of thought leaders, checking in from Bentonville. Vendium Global, well represented. Annette Walters, Relo Moms, checking in. Hope you had a
cool
vacation. Thank you very much, Annette. Janet's got a question. I think it's an interesting question. Janet says, does Yvonne plan to share Lauren's book with the World Bank Family Network?
I mean, we used to have a library when we met in person. And I do have a copy already for the library. So we have bought one for the library.
And now you're not meeting in person, so you have to buy a lot of copies. Is what's going to? I mean, how do you?
I highly encourage that, Yvonne.
Normally we have an in-person library. We have books, and people can check them out. But of course now we don't know when we'll be back for that one book to go. I mean, we have many books, but for it to take pride of place on our shelf. But I mean, it's definitely something. I mean, I thought maybe I could get Lauren to come to speak at our again, virtual alumni event, because we put our Career Lab participants into an alumni network to support each other. And we hope, that's the other thing. We ask
my pleasure. I'd be happy to.
If they find a job, that they would then help somebody else find a job too. So, I mean, that would be a good place to, but then they have jobs, you see. No, they don't. Not all alumni have work. So that was why I was thinking of you then.
Well, and the other thing that I would just say is I designed this book so that it could be for someone reading and going through, or it could also just be professional development for career coaches. Just something to, this is the collective wisdom of hundreds of years of experience in impact group coaches, and so I think coaches overall, and Yvonne, you even said this is why you decided to read the book and join the conversation, is because you wanted to just see what was going on and other best practices. And so therefore, this was designed so that if at any point you or any other coach for that matter wants to bring some of the content into their practice, perfect. It's designed to raise the collective wisdom of the coaching profession, in addition to being available for any one person who needs the support.
Yvonne, I wanted to ask you, as someone who kind of lives this practice here, and this is your passion, did anything, when you were reading this, did anything stand out to you specifically and resonate with you? I'd just be curious to know what really stuck out most in your mind when you read this book.
I think to me is know your triggers and take control before it sets off a chain reaction. I actually wrote that down because I think as Lauren will know, knowing your triggers is the key actually to living a life well lived, because what triggers me doesn't trigger you. So the moment I can regulate my emotions around my triggers and recalibrate, I am generally more effective anyway. Whether I'm relocating, whether I'm in the workplace, even whether, how I handled the lockdown and COVID. Because the uncertainty triggers that really set me going are not necessarily the ones that set you going.
Have you seen that in your work, Yvonne, with the accompanying talent? Have you seen some of that work with, let's say, triggers, for instance, since this resonated with you? Have you seen people effectively work through those things? Something I struggle with myself personally.
Yes, I think there are some who are more successful than others, but I think that emotional capacity, it's a very complex thing. I don't think people fail just because they don't try. I think you need a lot of emotional capacity, and I think it depends how deep your wounding is. And how big your how big your trigger is. If there are many little triggers, I think that's quite easy to manage. But for instance, if it's let's just use the example, if it's years and years of anger, because I feel that the career privilege has always been my partners. I mean, I'm doing 15 years of anger because suddenly somebody said to me, "You're angry." Takes a long time to unravel, so that's why I like that. Take control before it sets off a chain reaction. So I think it depends how deep you are to a certain extent in what holds you back.
And that's one of the things that we talk about in the book also, in terms of there are some things that maybe some journaling exercises, talking with a friend, going through some of the suggestions that are in the book might be perfectly sufficient to move you past where you are. But, in the example that you just gave, Yvonne, if we're talking about someone who has some deep-seated anger or anxiety, or you name the situation, based on years of repression or just not dealing with it, then there's absolutely, the opportunity where there should be an evaluation of, do I need to get some professional help to go through this process? If we're talking about spouses and anger, then maybe some group marriage counseling even. I give an example in the book about a woman who's accompanying her partner on a relocation. And when she initially stumbles through her job search and is frustrated, then, it comes out in anger. And it seems like she's angry at the world. It seems like she's angry at her partner. But in fact, I think the deeper source of anger is anger at herself for allowing this situation to become what it is. And so, there's lots of different ways that these emotions can materialize. And so then, a lot of it is just recognizing what is the root cause here. And then how do we start, by peeling back the onion and then start to address things at the root rather than the symptoms.
I think what Lauren's book does too, I think it gives people a vocabulary to name their emotions, because this is very systematic and it's defined, frustration and anxiety, the differences, between that and anger and things. So I think it gives you a chance to label what you feel. And as Lauren says, then you can decide, once you've named it and understood it, then you can say, oh, do I need help? Do I need to work with a coach? Can I fix this myself? Exactly as you say, do I journal and I'm okay?
I think,
oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that reminds me of something I say towards the end of the book. A friend of mine, Susan Packard, wrote a book called Fully Human, and she has a saying where you name it, claim it, and then let it go. So once you name the emotion and you own that that's what you're experiencing, you're that much more able to move forward past it. If you're not even acknowledging it, then there's no way you can actually deal with it to move forward.
Yep, I agree.
That's fantastic. This is wonderful. Got some great comments coming in over here. I love the fact that we're talking about this because I have a lot of friends who are relocating, right? Or have relocated or just relocated. In fact, I got one who's relocated right now to take an opportunity in Ohio, or actually in Kentucky. And they're using Lauren's company. They're using the Impact Group. My wife actually said, ask who's relocating them. And they said the Impact Group. And I'm like, well, that's good that they identify, that is their life, lifeline, right? But it's unfortunately it doesn't end well all the time. I know people who have relocated and they lost their marriage. I know people who have really, things have really gone off the rails. I've relocated to Texas, Florida, Texas, North Carolina, and Michigan, and it's been very difficult for my accompanying talent as well. And we've struggled through it every time we go through the phases, right? And it's extremely difficult. And I love the fact that we're talking about this right now, because I think people don't talk about mental health. They don't talk about the relationship dynamics. They don't talk about the fallout that's inevitable with your family when you go through this. And I think if you fail to plan for it, then you're going to become a victim of it, and I love to name it, claim it, and let it go, right? But let's go through a couple of comments here, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts, Lauren and Yvonne. Let's see here. Gosh, we got some great ones here. Sandra Clary, I have several friends affiliated with World Bank, and you all do a great job of welcoming and settling in with families who often have additional needs because of the difference in not only location, but also culture. So kudos.
Well, thank you.
Isn't that nice to hear?
That is nice to hear.
Rory says, that was a good nap, LOL, referring to my sabbatical, my hiatus. Hello, everyone from Mini Moves in Broadview. What's up, Rory? Good to see you. Dad checking in. So Dad's active in the chat. Let's see. Now, Dad is a family therapist, counselor, does a lot of things. He has some comments here. Lynn Greenberg checking in from Pivot. Let's see what Dad says here. Dad says, how does one desensitize triggers? I don't know. Any thoughts on that? And then he goes on. Actually, I like this one better. When is professional help indicated? Lauren, let's start with you here. Yeah. So you have a family of coaches, or a team of coaches, right? Who coach folks. And at what point do they say, hey, I think we need to recommend this person seeks professional help? What is that?
Well, certainly people would benefit from professional help in the form of therapy or more formal counseling. If, certainly if there's more of a depression indicated, then, typical career transition is something where someone might feel low, but it's not like a constant chronic state. So there's a eventual swing, or there's ups and downs. If you're constantly in a down, or if you are struggling to get out of bed in the morning, that would be much more of an indication of depression. If there are situations like, my coaching team did a lunch and learn that I attended today, where they were actually talking about grief. And there's a similar story that I share in the book about a woman who lost her home due to foreclosure during the last downturn. So being laid off in this situation, immediately puts people back in a trigger situation of reliving that grief or that anxiety, fear. And, in the story that I tell in the book, that's a true story, someone immediately, this woman puts her house back on the market immediately. She's not even going to deal with, what the current situation. She just says, I'm not going to let my house be taken away from me again. So I'm going to take control. So the question there is, is she being proactive in taking control of her own situation, or is she just glossing over some of these emotions that are immediately triggering her to be in that state where she was, back in the last financial downturn? And so that's a situation where, in that case, maybe the situation does benefit from digging deeper into, okay, what do you need to really experience or feel or go through to heal those wounds? Because losing your house is a pretty deep wound. If you haven't dealt with it, then that's probably going to come up in other ways similarly. And so, maybe the answer is stay in control and sell your house now so that doesn't happen. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the opportunity to deal with those wounds isn't still there.
Well, and I love what you're saying also about the trauma, and when faced with traumatic events, we kind of go back to traumas, which bring up fears. And in your book, you talk about, when did that fear start? It's a question to ask yourself when you're confronted with a fear, and fear is I think you outlined it as like the third emotion. But understanding when did that fear start, to help me understand that how you use that tool, and what the importance of going back to when that fear started was.
Well, if this is something that is a recurring theme in your life, so let's say, for example, that you go into networking situations and you have to do an incredible amount of pumping yourself up, or a lot of people have fear and anxiety around interviewing. And so there's some mental blocks going on in those situations. Sometimes you can go back and say, okay, well, is it just because you're an introvert and it takes a lot of energy from you, or is it something deeper? And sometimes in coaching sessions, when we ask that question, someone will say, well, honestly, if I think about it, when I was 12, I gave a presentation in class and everybody laughed at me because I said something and I messed up. And ever since then, I've just never wanted to speak in public again. And so, going into an interview reminds me of that situation. And so not necessarily that you have to go into therapy for that, but is that one of those name it, claim it, and let it go? Or can you, through coaching or journaling or just understanding that situation a little bit more, recognize, yes, that happened to that 12-year-old girl, but you're the 40-year-old woman now. So how does she handle things differently than the 12-year-old girl handles? Because we all bring that 12-year-old girl or that 5-year-old boy to work with us, to every interview us. That those experiences create who we are. And so acknowledging that's part of who we are, and nurturing, saying that's okay. And I like literally some of the coaching that we do might be, what would you say to that 12-year-old girl? How would you comfort her? If you were her mother, your mother, how would you support her through that? And is that some of those kinds of stories or experiences can then help to heal those wounds? So Yvonne, I saw you nodding. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Well, actually, what I do in the Career Lab is that I have the exercise called What Story Do You Tell Yourself? Now, I particularly focus on what is the story you tell yourself about your position as accompanying talent, because I think, so the first thing I ask them to do is to rephrase, and from now on, with your permission, Lauren, they will be called accompanying talent. Before that, I always start my workshop by saying, you are not a trailing spouse. I refuse to allow anybody to use that word. I know it has its roots in research. It's a research terminology, but I choose not to use it. So we use accompanying spouse, accompanying partner, but I will go up a notch from future into accompanying talent. So thank you. So one of our exercises that we do is, what story do you tell yourself? And it's very interesting because this is a workshop, not a therapy session. It's very personal. I don't ask them to share. It is the exercise that we use the least time in the workshop, but it has the maximum impact. And when we go back and we evaluate and we ask them, what did you find helpful? They say, what story did I tell myself? And I have never asked anybody, what is that story? But I start them off in the workshop and I say, if you want to continue, do this at home. And they all come back and say they've changed their minds. I mean, I do a little bit after about mindset matters, and to show them why the language we use and how we tell our stories does make a difference to us. Now, that I find absolutely fascinating, and it supports exactly what Lauren is saying. It's that 12-year-old child, that 5-year-old boy, who feels, I'm not good enough, I'll never get the job, and all the. Of course, you have the other favorite topic, the gender issues that, they have, that men, if they fit 60% of the job description, they think they can get the job, and the women have to be 110. And then they, when you ask a woman, can you do this? She starts with, yes, but, and then continues with it's like a confessional, all the things I cannot do. And then in the end, and so we have in our workshop is, we're not into confession here. Can you do it? And we practice, and again, to change the language. But I think the men find it easier.
Well, we're always pretending that we can do things we can't do. I mean, that's our MO. That's how we go through life. Okay. So, I mean, we've been practicing that for 37 years in my case. Right. So, but that's interesting. But I think that you bring up a great point. These are all skills that we don't necessarily have practiced until we need a job, right? Until we find ourselves without a job and looking, and all of a sudden now we have to be this gifted storyteller, and we have to be this fantastic resume formatter, writer, grammatically perfect, this expert networker, right? And all of a sudden, like, now we have the sales prospector, right? Like, all these tools and tricks that we don't ever use probably in our job, unless we're in sales, maybe. Right now, all of a sudden, we have to be a gifted orator and interviewer, right? And so I'd like to ask you both, and I'd like to hear both your thoughts and maybe some stories even around it. But how do people get these skills that they never need until they need them?
You want to take it, Yvonne?
Yeah, that was terrible. I just threw it out there. I should have said somebody.
I mean,
go ahead, Yvonne.
To me, again, it's mindset. It's whether you have a growth mindset or not. And I think it's how you take it. If you take it as a skill, if you look at it, that I'm not a born storyteller, but I can learn. I do think that some people are very gifted storytellers, But, it's on a continuum. I mean, we all don't have to be 110%. I just need to be able to tell a good story about my career.
One good story.
Just one good story. And I think if you prepare, I think if you practice, and, Lauren would know this, there are lots of formulas that you can use to help structure your thoughts. And okay, of course, there's some, that's the thing that makes us human, that we're not the same. We're all unique. But I think if you think of it as a skill rather than a trait, I am a great storyteller, I was born with it. Well, then what happens if you're not born with it? You're really stuck then, aren't you? But, if it's a skill and you're going to get better at it, so maybe at one interview, you're not as good, but if you learn from it, you can tell a better story next time. That's what I say to the people that I work with. It's a skill.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And like you said, Ben, we overall as careerists are not necessarily professional job seekers. Hopefully we're not. But and you have other areas of expertise. And so there's the few handful of career coaches where you can say, this is my area of expertise. Overall, then, what are the pieces that you need to learn and be open to understanding? Do I need to improve on this? And so that's why, Ben, we've talked about the super team in terms of, the personal board of directors in your job search process, getting feedback and figuring out where are the areas you need to learn and improve and then show up better next time. And that's okay. We're human. The one thing that I want to go back to with what Yvonne was talking about with how women approach the job search process a little differently, or even the self-selection process. I'm curious in mobility, your thought in terms of how this benefit that, certainly the World Bank Group is offering to its spouses and partners going through your program with the Family Network, or the companies that are providing services, such as impact groups. What role do you think this type of service has in the ability for helping women to climb the ranks, because they're recognizing that, hey, my husband will be taken care of in terms of a job search, and so I'm more willing to accept a move, therefore?
I think it helps because our professional development programs are the most well-attended. Of all our programs, are the most well-attended by our male accompanying talent. So having a job it's important to both. But I think that society, and depending on the culture you come from, it becomes more or less traditional to accompany your spouse. You see what I mean? And so we have a completely multiracial community. So it depends a lot on your cultural norms, how easy it is for you to move. So yes, the short answer to that is yes. It's not that the males don't have challenges. They do in many, many ways. They have it more than others. And I've talked to them at length about it. But of course, having this inbuilt support, having this welcoming, we have a very strong welcoming program that really gives you all the nuts and bolts of how to adjust to life in DC and stuff like that. So having all those things, it eases, I think, that level of uncertainty. We give you tools to bring control back into what seems like a totally chaotic life, which I think is very important. And I think in response to that other question earlier about triggers, I think uncertainty definitely is a bad trigger for everybody, because our brain actually craves certainty. So nobody does well. It's just how not well are you doing? That's all.
I think that's a fascinating topic, by the way. I was talking to somebody about this in another context, though, when here we are in the global mobility, industry, and I was talking to the CEO of an RMC just this morning, right? And she's like, oh, RMCs are really screwed. And she's like, the ones that are doing well have household goods moving companies attached to them. And I said, what do you mean? We're really screwed too. And it's like, it's a contest. Okay, we're all in a room. How screwed are we, right now?
Yeah. Well, but it's also interesting that there's a perception, and that's a microcosm of one industry, but there's a perception that, oh, well, so-and-so's got it better, or because we only know what our boat is, and we don't actually know what someone else is going through.
That's
and
right.
I think we see that same kind of mentality can be applied to so many things in the world of COVID right now. In the whole context of grieving or emotional challenges during COVID, it's something else that came up during the Lunch and Learn with the coaches today that I was sitting in on was this concept of, well, I feel really bad, or I feel anxious, or I feel upset about things, but I don't have a right to, because at least I'm alive, or, I have a job. And so therefore I'm not allowed to feel as bad as, someone who doesn't have a job. And I think one of the things that in our culture we need to accept is it's okay for you to feel bad in your situation. Your situation's not their situation. And, we're in different boats. I like that one Facebook meme that says, we're all in the same ocean, but we have different boats. We have our own boat, and your situation can feel rocky for you, even if it's not as rocky as someone else's.
I like it.
I think right now we're all in different types of boats, but we're all in the same storm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's pretty bad at the moment for everybody in one way or another.
Yeah, it is. Let's see here. We got a few people checking in here. Tim Quirk from Western New York checking in. It's good to see you, Tim. And that says, Yvonne, you are so right. What you learn to handle and manage better in relocation does translate into so many other areas of life. The tools follow the needs. Interesting.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that, as I was writing the book, I very well could have just called it, take control of your life or something like that, because, the exercises you can take into any situation and apply it very, very similarly. This just happened to be in the context of job search.
I could definitely see that. Sure.
Yeah.
Julie actually goes on and kind of echoes that. She says, great book, Lauren. I learned so much. I never took my EQ into consideration and now have a better understanding of past failures in job searches and more confidence for future ones.
Thank you, Julie.
Well, that's lovely. Let's see here. Then my dad's over here with some experimental treatments here. I'm just kidding. Dad says eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy often helps quickly. I don't know is this a service, Lauren, that your team offers?
Yeah. I won't go there. My mom actually, when she founded the business, she was a practicing psychologist and technically still is. She holds her license still. So that is something that she can help people with. I personally do not promise any eye movement desensitization.
I guess you could do that with Zoom, though, right? All right, let's see here. Annette says, "How do you lead people through current emotions to a result they desire?" I think that's a great one. Lauren, I'm going to ask your thoughts on this. How do you lead people through current emotions to a result they desire?
Well, I would always start with just making sure that you're clear on what emotions you actually are experiencing. And so journaling is a great way to start with that. I think for extroverts, a lot of times it feels really good to just get it out and talk. I would encourage that, but I would say everybody in a job search process should also keep a journal. And in fact, I came across some research recently, and I'm a little annoyed that I didn't have it in order to put into the book. But there is research that talks about people that journal actually have a better job search outcome, meaning they find a job faster than people who don't. So people who journal about their emotions have a better job search outcome than people who don't. And so first I would say make sure you're clear on what those emotions are. And then, understand what is that desired result. I mean, I think in a job search, most people would say, I want a job, but also, it's a great place to start with. Let's get really specific about what you really want in a job. How do you prioritize? And then also go back to your network. Make sure you're really clear about your strengths, the value you bring to an organization, and then how you can apply that and speak about that. So those are a couple places to start with there, I would say.
Yeah, and Yvonne, you do a lot of this type of coaching and counseling and creating these workshops and these spaces for people. And so I'm sure you've seen people go through these journeys firsthand, at the World Bank Family Network. Is there anything, that you would advocate for leading people through current emotions to a result they desire?
I think very much what Lauren said. I think clarity is very, very important. And I think the other piece is also knowing the value that you bring. And I would say also, I think sometimes it overlays with desperation, that people start to apply for jobs, any jobs, because there is somehow a comfort in just doing something about it. But actually, I think it's getting worse, because you're not then being targeted and you are applying for jobs that you don't actually qualify for. And then, of course, your self-esteem is beaten every time nobody, you don't pass the applicant tracking system, you don't. So I think clarity, knowing the value that you bring, networking, and I think in time you will get there. And I think, it is in Lauren's book. I think that important is to get the facts. I think facts do really help you to regulate some of the emotion that's involved. If you understand how the applicant tracking system works, you understand how many, job people apply for jobs per position. Mm-hmm. Once you start to see the numbers, you sort of get what this game is about. I think it's a great, it's a stabilizer. If you will just go get the facts, do the research, and not just be completely driven by this. Oh, I've just got to write resumes and keep filling out applications. I think one more thing is that people hide, and they think that the computer. I mean, now it's slightly different because of COVID, but pre-COVID, I think a lot of people, especially if they are not American and this is a foreign country, they prefer to do their job search online. And actually, it's people who give other people jobs. It's not the computer. The computer does not give you a job. And so often they spend, if you look at the 100% of time, my job search time, a lot of them spend 70% on the computer and 30% in the world, which actually should be the reverse. 70% in the world and 30% on the computer. So, right. I mean, those sorts of things, checking that your strategy is right.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Yvonne. And it brings up something that you've both talked about, networking. And this is something in the anxiety chapter, and you talked about it throughout, mm-hmm. Lauren, but it's something in the anxiety chapter. But, and it's one of those skills that not all of us, if you're an accountant, networking is not your, in your wheelhouse necessarily, right? But how, and then now, here we are in a global pandemic, and Yvonne, you're saying spend 70% of your time outside in the world, right? Well, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
But well, which even in the world of COVID, you should still be spending 70% of your time, interacting in some form or another.
And what does that look like? What does that look like nowadays, Lauren? And then I'd like to hear Yvonne's take on that.
Yeah, my take on that is leverage LinkedIn and even Facebook, all of your social communities as best as possible. So in the case of LinkedIn, make sure you're looking at your second and third degree connections and be very, very targeted. So, what Yvonne was saying with, not just applying to everything or, be very strategic with your job search. I say be rifle shot focused rather than shotgun. And by being very focused on half a dozen or a dozen positions or companies, you're going to be so much more successful than 100 applications online. And so if you identify that those dozen companies that you're interested in, then how do you work your way connection by connection and go to your Facebook and figure out how do I figure out who might work at some of these companies? And you know what?
Yeah.
If the term networking is intimidating to you, then think of it like reconnecting. How can you go back to the people that you went to high school with, the people that you went to college with, the people that you know from your previous positions, and network, reconnect with those people. And in the case of a lot of the accompanying talent out there, you might be in a situation where you don't have those networks in your new community right up front. So spend a lot of time being very, very focused about making some key connections up front, getting involved with some organizations or who are influential people that can help to support you as well.
Yeah, great. Yvonne, what are your tips for networking, especially in COVID?
Well, to me, I would go back to, I think for me, the one key thing is to use your connections, because it's a little bit difficult to do virtual cold calling, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So to me, in COVID times, I would really go back, like Lauren said, to, people I used to work with, old classmates, as in David Burkus in his book says, a friend of a friend. And really that is what you're looking for, a friend of a friend.
Yeah.
And do that.
I like that.
And I think especially in the world of COVID these days, people want to help. Mm-hmm. And so if you can make a case for the value you bring to the type of first of all, what are you looking for specifically? Make it very easy for someone to say, oh, yeah, Yvonne, I want to call her about this position. And then be very clear about the value you bring to an organization. And, some people might need a little convincing if they're going to introduce you to their friends. So how can you show that? How can you build that credibility? Those are the kinds of things that just be strategic about how you can make it clear that you can bring value to an organization. And
I love
those connections.
I think Dr. Heidi Grant, can I just say this, has a very good piece in the Harvard Business Review on how to ask for help. I can't remember the exact name of the title, but she actually talks about asking about specific types of help. And that people are, and it's based on research, her research, that people are more inclined to help when you actually tell them what you want, rather than the big open, would you be able to help me? Because then I'm sort of feeling, well, now I have to figure out what that means. But if you ask me, can you connect me with Lauren? I can either say yes or no. If I know Lauren, I can say yes. If I don't, then I have to say, well, I'm sorry. She's not in my network. You see what I mean?
Sure. Makes perfect sense. A specific ask. Yeah.
Be easy to help.
Be easy to help. Let's see. We got some great comments here. I want to try to incorporate all of them. Let's see here. Victoria says, I'm having so many getting to know each other phone calls, but no job offers yet. But for once, I think networking will result in something. But Victoria, you're also building a brand right now. You've been building this, and people are getting to know you through the show and through your posts on LinkedIn and some of the stuff you're doing. And I have faith that it's gonna click for you. Olivia Bakrami, storytelling is the best way to communicate with your audience. She's very much enjoying the conversation. We have two more questions. One from these are fun. And that says, as the mobility industry changes, how do you think personal/family coaching will be more part of relocation? I'm going to ask you both this. Yvonne, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. As the mobility industry changes, how do you think personal and family coaching will be more part of relocation?
I mean, personally, I think coaching is very, very useful. So, I mean, in one way, I don't see that it would change, unless, of course, COVID produces greater anxiety.
Interesting. And Lauren,
That's what I.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Lauren, I'd like to hear your thoughts as well.
Well, I think that one of the things that will continue to change, and I'll have to think about a little bit more how COVID will affect this, but overall, I see there just being a tremendous drive towards more diversity in leadership across the board. And I believe that this kind of support is critical for getting people to move, because especially women leaders are going to be looking for more support from their for their spouses or partners. Then I think just the reality is that women sometimes will demand more than the men will for their partners. So I think that having this available proactively as part of a women in leadership or diversity in leadership initiative is something valuable. I think it's yet to see how COVID is going to change this with more work from home. How will the mobility industry adapt to that? I mean, certainly right now with balancing, the work from home and more and more school situations are falling on women in the workplace as well. And so, I mean, I think that's going to be a challenge where maybe not so much this particular career benefit or coaching piece will be called into question, but how can organizations do more to proactively support the family overall, or how does flexibility in their career play into mobility as well? So, I think we're yet to see we've yet to see how that's going to affect us, but I do believe that there will be changes on the personal and family and flexibility pieces, and we'll see how that affects the mobility industry.
It's interesting because going back to what Yvonne said earlier about the take rate for male partners versus female partners when it comes to some of the programs that she does, and did you say more female leaders means more male trailing? Wait, trailing talent? Am I saying accompanying? It's an awkward word for me. Accompanying talent. Oh my gosh. This is when you know you're over time. Sandra Clary, maybe counseling, coaching, support for when families don't travel with the expat, as many companies are saying they expect. That's interesting. This last question, I've saved this for last. Is Roy, you're a crazy guy. I love this question because I also have this problem. So I have a naturally loud voice. When I talk, I sound like I'm talking down to you or talking over you. That I come off as abrasive. How do I fix that without sounding like I'm whispering? God bless you, Lori.
I would say, so this is the perfect example of what I say, use your super team.
Okay.
You have friends and family, professional acquaintances, any number of people that you hopefully can trust to give you some honest feedback. This about yourself. I can relate. I was actually having a conversation with someone today where I'm like, I feel like I'm yelling, but how do I tone it down? So, and I think part of it is, through doing all the Zoom you're talking on your cell phone all the time. It's like you're kind of naturally just talking a little louder than your natural speaking voice. So I would have the conversations with people and just get feedback, and then try different decibel levels and make sure, okay, does that sound weird though? Am I you sounding breathy or airy? Does that sound unnatural?
Just sounding breathy.
Practice. It's the same thing with interviews. It feels awkward, but do it, because it is so valuable both on Zoom, in person, and phone. Do the practice for interviews. And in this case, just, I guess, conversations.
Yeah.
It is worth it to get that feedback.
I think Lauren said it all, really, because I think the key for all of us is to be mindful. The most important thing, particularly for job search, is how you land. It's about them, it's not about you. They are looking for fit. They are looking, it's about them. And I think we have to try to get their perspective and put ourselves on the other side, because it's how I'm landing that counts. It's not actually what I really think about myself is not really relevant in one sense. It's how I'm coming across to you right now that is much more important.
Yeah.
If this was a job interview.
Rory, as a guy that struggled with this as well, being scary, I would recommend you smize when you talk. So even if you're loud, you're just happy. Okay, that's all that is. All right.
Great
Rory,
point.
yeah, just smize when you're loud.
That's a little too much. The creepy eyes.
Yeah, there's a balance.
Or as my daughter says, crazy eyes.
Crazy eyes. Anyway, so this has been a lot of fun. This has been very insightful. I love the stories. I love the tips. I'm sure this has helped a lot of people, getting some great feedback here in the comments. I want to give just one opportunity to leave us with a final word. So, Yvonne, would you leave us with a final thought for our audience? And then I'll go to you, Lauren.
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Yvonne, would you like to?
Yes, you can.
Oh,
it's all about the mindset.
There you go. Awesome. Yes, you can. It's all about the mindset. I love it. Thank you, everybody. We got a fantastic show lined up for you for the rest of the week. We got some great guests. We will be posting that on LinkedIn. Thank you again to Lauren, to Yvonne, and don't forget to grab this book, Take Control of Your Job Search. These are emotional lessons for not only the job search, but for life. So thank you so much for being on the show today, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Yvonne.
Thank you, Ben, for having us. Nice to see you, Lauren. Thank you
Take
so
care.
much.